Hello students, and welcome once again to our lecture series, Everything You Need to Know to Survive English Class. I am Professor Blake Petit. Today we will be discussing Dante Alighieri's classic work of fantasy, The Divine Comedy. This was deemed necessary as, based on last week's essays, several of you are under the unfortunate impression that this book has something to do with Xbox. As always, you are encouraged to follow along in your textbook. Unfortunately, the book is still unavailable in the campus bookstore. And as a result of my protestations to this fact, I am also, unfortunately, unavailable at the campus bookstore, specifically within 500 yards of it. The book is fortunately available both in print and electronically at Amazon.com. Please open your textbooks to page 26, and let's begin. Dante Alighieri, born 1265, died 1321, was the author of The Divine Comedy, which isn't nearly as funny as the title would lead you to believe. Despite that, it is considered a masterpiece of literature, and like the English epic Beowulf, helped to codify the language in which it was written. In fact, Dante has been called the father of the Italian language, which really surprised him because the invitation told him the topic of that particular talk show was going to be bitching stocking caps of the 13th century. The Divine Comedy is a complex poem in which Dante tells of his journey through the realms of the afterlife on an Easter weekend in the year 1300. In Part 1, Inferno, Dante is taken by the Roman poet Virgil on a sightseeing tour of hell, which is divided into 9 circles, each growing progressively worse. The circles represent such sins as lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, using your phone in a movie theater, murder, and canceling great TV shows after just one season. Dante's afterlife is an interesting mixture of Christian theology and Greek and Roman mythology. To get to hell, he rides a ferry piloted by Charon, who also brought the Greeks to Hades. Several prominent members of Greek and Roman society appear throughout the work, although not once they get to heaven because ain't no non-Christians getting in there. The first level of hell, Limbo, is reserved for people who didn't actually sin all that much, but weren't Christians and thus cannot enter heaven. Guys like Socrates, Plato, Julius Caesar, or Sammy Davis Jr. They aren't really punished there, but instead exist in sort of a heaven light, although for just 99 cents they could buy the full version with no ads. On the level of lust, folks like Helen of Troy are tossed around by a violent storm, just like they allowed their urges to control them in life. Level 3, Gluttony, leaves its inmates unaware of their neighbors as they die in a nasty quagmire of mud and sludge beneath an ice-cold rainstorm. The greedy are forced to joust with heavy weights, and the wrathful drown in a marsh. Heretics get good old-fashioned hellfire, and in the very core of hell, a weeping Satan eats the souls of traitors, which it turns out aren't half bad with the proper marinade. In Purgatorio, Virgil and Dante climb the mountain of Purgatory. Those who are repentant but unclean here have the opportunity to make their way to heaven. First, though, they have to hang around at the bottom of the mountain for a time commensurate to the degree of their sins. For instance, the executive responsible for the live-action G.I. Joe movies has to wait until somebody makes a successful cinematic universe franchise featuring the GoBots. Several literary scholars find this too harsh a punishment for a benevolent god, and therefore consider Purgatorio to be apocryphal. Purgatory is made up of 7 terraces, each corresponding to one of the 7 deadly sins, and on each level those guilty of that sin must purge themselves. The prideful must learn humility, the slothful become terribly busy, the envious have to watch every episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians until they are no longer angry that these people are famous for no damn reason. Finally, Dante reaches the top of Purgatory, the Garden of Eden, and there finds his beloved Beatrice. She takes him through the River Length, which erases memory of past sins, like Spring Break 1296. Then drinks from the River Unue, which restores good memories, like Spring Break 1297. And Beatrice takes him to heaven. Paradiso, the third part of the Divine Comedy, shows off the different parts of heaven, which should have been no surprise at this point. Heaven, it seems, is a series of 9 concentric circles which surround the earth, beginning with the moon. Here we meet those who, although good, weren't necessarily consistently good, and so they reside in a lesser heaven, where the free Wi-Fi is really slow and the continental breakfast is just cereal in a toaster with bagel slots. The spheres of heaven then correspond with the planets, each a home for those who, while good, lacked in some virtue or another. Things really kick into gear at Sphere 4, the sun, home of the wise. Here, Dante meets the lights of the great thinkers of all time, such as Thomas Aquinas, King Solomon, and Sammy Davis Jr. Sphere 5, Mars, is for the warriors of faith. 6, Jupiter, goes to the just rulers. 7, Saturn, is for car salesmen who don't screw their customers. Finally, Dante enters the Empyrean, a non-physical realm that is the home of God, and consequently has super-fast Wi-Fi. God turns out to be 3 circles, each somehow occupying the same space, and representing the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dante doesn't actually explain how the circles fit together, saying, "That was not a flight for my wings," which nobody seemed willing to point out didn't actually answer the question. In the end, Dante is enveloped by God's love, unaware that describing it that way made it kind of sound like God was the Borg Queen. The Divine Comedy remains one of the classic depictions of the afterlife, although when you get right down to it, it has never been officially recognized by the Church and is not technically liturgical canon. So whenever you see a description of heaven or hell inspired directly by Dante, remember it's basically a piece of Bible fanfiction, as authentic as that guy who wrote that My Little Pony story that ended with Twilight Sparkle marrying him and taking him to Camelot. This concludes today's lecture, my class. As always, I am available in my office at the posted hours. I may also be found on Facebook.com/BlakeMPT, on Twitter @BlakeMP, or on Instagram @BlakeMP25. Your homework assignment this week, 500 words on this discussion question. Of all the television series of the 1980s, did any of them have as many clip shows as The Golden Girls? Use proper citation. Thank you, and we will be together again very soon.